You can all join palms and repeat after me. I take refuge in the Buddha.
I take refuge in the Buddha.
I take refuge in the Dharma.
I take refuge in the Dharma.
I take refuge in the Sangha.
I take refuge in the Sangha.
Keeping the palms joined. Put the palms down. All right, good evening, everybody.
Good evening.
Nice to see you all here. Thanks for the flowers. Yeah, we just turned the heat on. So in about 90 minutes, it'll kick in. You two look like you just came from the snow. I mean, imagine if we weren't in San Diego, what we would be doing right now. Same thing, right? You're on a boat all day long. Freezing out there too, huh? Yeah, it's I think for me the beauty of this practice, and often the most challenging, which to me is why that's the beauty of it, is to figure out how do we bring what we sit here and explore day in and day out, week in and week out, year in and year out, into your life. And there's all these core teachings of Buddhism and the practice of meditation. So it's one thing to be able to understand what that is intellectually, philosophically. It's one thing to be able to, say I meditate or I go meditate. It's one thing to be able to recite the Four Noble Truths and the Eightfold Path and the Six Paramitas. But then what? And I think that's where my master used to always talk about how to study Buddhism, which is very important because the application of it is critical. Otherwise, it just becomes something you talk about. And I know for me early on with Buddhism, it was, this is going back 27 years, but it was really this like cool thing. Like Buddhism was cool because it happened a long time ago from people who lived in faraway lands and spoke other languages. And so it was just a neat thing as a 20-year-old that I explored. But it wasn't until 7, 8, 9 years later that I actually began to realize, you have to do some of this stuff in your day. And I didn't like that. It was a lot easier to read about people being nice to other people, or to talk about how you read about people who are nice to other people, or nowadays to post about people who are nice to other people. So we're around those things constantly, or we can be around those things constantly via social media and going to places like this. But then where's the integration? And that's something that's different for every one of us in this room because, while I do eventually over the years get to know bits and pieces about, what you all do and where you spend your time, thankfully not all of it. But it's hard to figure out, okay, well, how do I bring this into my relationship? How do I bring this into my work life? How do I bring this into my education? How do I bring this into traffic at 5 o'clock on the 805 freeway? How do you bring this into that? Because otherwise, what this stuff becomes, and I say this pretty regularly, but I still think it's good to remind ourselves of it. Otherwise, what this stuff becomes is it becomes just like going to see a movie. How many of you like movies? I mean, for me, like I love going to see a movie. Like I've gone once in the last 3 years, but you know, go see a movie, get a massive thing of popcorn for like $18, get completely sick off of it, thirsty for 3 days because of all of the salt, and you're just sitting there chomping away. It reminds me of a 14-year-old kid. And you're just lost in la la movie land, 2 hours, 45 minutes of previews. And you escaped. And it was a really fun thing to go to. Now, some movies do impact your life, but for the most part, movies are entertainment. They're things to take us away from being tired or stressed or exhausted. And so, as I wrap up this completely random thought, which just popped in my head out of nowhere, make sure that this practice and going to places, again, it doesn't matter if it's here or whatever space you go to, or your yoga practice, any sort of spiritual work that you're doing, make sure that it's not something that you're just going to and observing like you do a movie. And we don't even pass out popcorn. So but figure out, how do you integrate that into your life? And like I said, that'll be different for each of you. And that takes some time to think about. How do you bring this into your work life, your personal life? Because that's where the challenges you're dealing with exist. So that's where we have to try to pull it in. And that's not easy to do. But with that, I'll start with the meditation practice. For those of you who are joining online virtually, thanks for being here. Nice to sit with you all. There's a chat box on the screen somewhere. Feel free to type in your name, say hello. I'll do my best to respond there as well. So a couple things I'll tell you before we begin, especially for those who might be new or sitting for the first time. Nothing's going to happen to you. You're not going to float away. You're not going to have any mystical, magical experiences. The mind that races all day long is not going to shut off. Don't judge your practice, meaning don't ask yourself, is this working or not working? Are you doing it right or wrong? We're just going to sit. We're going to breathe. You'll hear sounds inside, sounds outside. This is life. Life is filled with chaos. And this practice is learning to get quiet and still within all of the chaos. Posture, you just want to be comfortable. If you are on a cushion, often it helps slide to the front third. Pushing the stomach forward allows the back to straighten. Same thing on a chair or bench, however you're seated, just relaxing the shoulders, sitting upright. Hands are on the knees or lap, whatever's comfortable. If you need to move during meditation, simply move. Movement doesn't make you a bad meditator, just means you have an itch or your leg hurts. Most important, do not expect anything from this practice. We're just going to sit and breathe. I'll guide us as we begin, and we'll settle into a little bit of silence. And starting with the eyes closed if comfortable, or slightly open. Mouth is open or closed. We'll start with taking 3 deep breaths, slowly. And eventually, settle into a natural rhythm of the breath. Noticing the mind as it wanders, jumping from thought to thought. Start with gently guiding the attention, focus to the stomach or chest. Breathing in, feel them rise. Breathing out, they fall. Simply continue this practice, observing sensation of breath. As the mind wanders, lost in thought, recognize it. Release that thought. Return attention, focus to the breath. letting go of expectations, letting go of judgments from the practice, just sitting, breathing. Keeping the mind alert, aware of each sound, each thought, each physical sensation, yet concerned with nothing but sitting, breathing. And with the body still, rested, and the speech quiet, aware of all sounds, and the mind learning to settle. Know what it's like to just sit and breathe. Knowing with each breath, there's nothing else to do. Nowhere else to go. And no one else to be. Everything beautiful, exactly as it is. Sitting, breathing. And once again, taking 3 deep breaths, slowly. As you slowly open the eyes, slowly beginning to move. The most important with the practice of meditation is to recognize how you feel now, immediately after. Compare this to how you typically feel throughout your day. Recognize the difference, if there is one. Ask yourselves how you'd prefer to feel every day for the rest of your life. And realize however you feel now, if it's quiet, calm, and still, or a busy mind, racing mind, whatever you're sitting with at this moment, it's nothing to do with how we sit and hold the hands or cross the legs. It's nothing to do with the sounds around us or anything else for that matter. It's everything to do with your own mind and your own mind's reaction to an external condition. This is what the Buddha called pratitya samuppada, means dependent origination. This is the basis of the Buddha's awakening. The word Buddha simply means awakened. He was a human being no different than any one of us who began to understand why he suffered, why he got angry, sad, depressed, stressed, anxious. He began to understand the causal relationship of all phenomena. And what that means very simply for all of us, regardless of where you come from or what you believe in, or where you think you're going, your whole life is filled with things that happen. You react. More stuff happens. More reactions. That's it. So all we're working on is closing the gap to where the way you feel now is closer to how you feel always. Just as driven, motivated, productive, successful, whatever that means to you in your respective lives. But with a mind that's steady, clear, focused, distracted by nothing, disturbed by no one. It's not an easy practice. It's not necessarily fun. It's not an escape, as I alluded to earlier. It's direct perception into the present moment. And the present moment is very often quite difficult, very challenging, filled with conflict. Lots of beautiful present moments as well, but most people don't focus on those too much. Not quite sure why. Meditation is free. Buddhist practice is free. Sitting, breathing, becoming aware of what you think, what you say, and what you do. And that's it. Once we stop trying to change, fix, control, manipulate everything and everyone around us, and we work on changing our mind and our reaction to life around us, things get simpler. But it takes time. And as I spoke about at the beginning of this evening, early on, if you're newer to Buddhism, it can be this cool, neat, fun, interesting thing that intellectually and philosophically makes a lot of sense. And then there's the practice and figuring out how do we bring it into our lives. Because if you start to put this practice into your life, and when I say this practice, I mean pick any of the words: generosity, compassion, wisdom, right? Loving kindness, equanimity, joy, diligence, all these kind of key buzzwords that everybody talks about: non-attachment, impermanence. When you put all of these things, which are really deep, profound practices into your life will absolutely change. But it doesn't change until you begin to put these teachings into your life. And then this stuff, it's not about understanding it anymore. It's about feeling it. It's about living it. And to the point where your life is your meditation is your life. There's no separation between the two. You stuck in traffic is no different than sitting here right now. You arguing with a family member or friend is no different than sitting here right now. You dealing with stress and chaos at work is no different than sitting here right now. Because the one thing that's consistent through all of that is you. So it is a training of the mind to be present. So now that you understand everything you have to do the rest of your life, we're done. So I'll pause there. I'll open up to questions. For me, really, I just prefer to respond to questions, meditation, Buddhist practice, anything that's on your mind. We'll use the rest of our time this evening for that. And for those joining virtually, again, welcome. Glad you're here. As you are, feel free to say hello online there. And if you have any questions, I'll do my best to respond there as well. So thoughts, questions? Yes, sir.
From the book that you let me borrow,
Yes.
I haven't finished it yet, but it clearly explains the Buddha and the Sangha.
Mm.
But to my understanding, the Dharma is like the teaching or the lesson?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So the question for those who didn't hear it, did I give you the Thich Nhat Hanh book? Yeah. The orange one, the orange cover? Yeah. I haven't read it, so. I like to collect books because, but it's actually got a beautiful cover, right? Isn't it a tree?
Yeah.
There's a little almost like monk or nun person sitting there, white letters. What's the title? Like Compassion? There you go. Path of Compassion. Yeah, Thich Nhat Hanh. Beautiful book. I mean, the way it looks is beautiful. So I should read it. Yeah, I'm glad you're reading it. You can, give me a full book report. But your question around, you understand that the Buddha and you understand the Sangha. Your question is, what's the Dharma, and is the Dharma the teaching? So yes, and just to touch on that briefly, at the very beginning, we do what's called taking refuge. And for me, my formal practice, what I do day in and day out, is when I do my offerings, when I do any formal practice, I always join palms and I take refuge. It's just something that's important to me. So I share it out loud. I'm always facing that way. I don't know. And personally, I don't care if people's palms are joined or not. I don't know if they're reciting what I say or not. It doesn't really, that's not what's important to me. And it shouldn't be something that's done out of force either, because it's like, okay. I mean, I remember the first time when I took refuge, I'd been at that temple. This was 2003. I'd been at that temple like 2 weeks, and they said, "Hey, we're going to a refuge ceremony up in LA. Do you want to go?" And I'm like, "Sure." And I didn't know what the heck it was. And I just recited all the stuff. It wasn't even in English. It was in Mandarin, And so there I am reciting all this stuff and bowing and chanting, wearing robes. And I'm like, cool, I got a Dharma name, but it meant nothing to me. Right. So when it means something to you, that's when it's really, I think, profound as an individual. And so in brief, the Buddha, we take refuge in the Buddha, and it's not the Buddha himself. Right. He died 2,500 years ago. You are on your own, my friends. He cannot help you. Right? You're taking refuge in what's called bodhicitta, or Buddha nature. And what this teaching in brief is understanding that the Buddha, Siddhartha Gautama, who was a prince who lived 500 years before Christ, was just a person, no different than any one of us. He woke up, he ate, went to the bathroom, he slept, repeat, he died at 80. Okay? So bodhicitta is understanding that we all have the ability to awaken. That Buddha nature, bodhicitta, is within all of us, just like it was with the Buddha. So we're not trying to become the Buddha. We're trying to awaken to the Buddha nature that is already within us. The Buddhist teachings are wonderful because they say you're all already awakened. You just are not aware of it. So the good news is you're already there, right? So think of the sun, right? On a cloudy day, do you see the sun? When the clouds are out, can you see the sun? No. Is the sun there? What happens when the clouds part? So that's Buddha nature. So what you have, what I have, what we all have is clouds. greed, anger, ignorance. That's the second noble truth, the three poisons. So what we're working on is the practice of generosity, compassion, wisdom to overcome greed, anger, ignorance, allow the clouds to part, and our Buddha nature, our sun, will shine. The Dharma is the teachings. Often Dharma, you'll see it, capital D, small d, but often Dharma is referred to as the teachings of the Buddha, right? Or in sutras and the teachings, it was all memorized, 50, 100 years after he died, and then eventually, transcribed on the palm leaves. And for 2,500 years, there's been a big, huge game of telephone going on with Buddhist teachings, right? But the reality is, if they work for you, that's all that matters. It doesn't matter if the Buddha said it. It doesn't matter if Donald Duck said it. If it helps make you a kinder, gentler person, then beautiful. So the Dharma are the teachings. But Dharma is also just kind of ultimate reality, right? Which is beyond our perception. And then the Sangha is the community. And at the time of the Buddha, it was the monks and, then the nuns and the group of people that came and practiced together. And fast forward 2,500 years, it's people who gather in community to share and explore Buddhist teachings and challenge each other and hold each other accountable and, show up for each other. So, yeah. Does that help? Yeah. Other questions? Yeah.
Jeff, is there somebody that you personally, over the course of your time, thought exhibited bodhicitta like more than any person? Like, is there somebody that strikes you in memory as like, the Buddha nature was?
Yeah, you.
Okay.
The question was, is there someone over time that strikes me more than anyone else that exhibits Buddha nature? And my response was,
me.
You. Yeah.
Good.
You know how good I am at answering questions.
I love it.
Yeah. I know where you're going with that. The obvious thing was, who do I admire, or who do I respect, or who I look up to, who do I think maybe lived wholeheartedly that path?
I know you throw curveballs, so that's
yeah.
a good one.
But you. Yeah.
Especially a good segue from the last one.
Yeah, I actually answered that question. That was rare. Other questions, thoughts? Yeah.
How many sects of Buddhism are there, and how did they branch out? Are there any Christianity branches out and such?
Yeah, so there's a lot. So the question of how many different sects of Buddhism are there? There's many as Christianity. The good news about comparative religious stuff for me is I always have an easy out because I was raised Jewish, got kicked out of everything and didn't pay attention. So I can't tell you anything about that. I also couldn't tell you about Christianity, Catholicism, Muslim, or any other religion. So I'm like clear on comparative religious stuff. As far as Buddhist stuff, I'm also not a historian and a scholar, right? So I've so far not answered your question as well at all. But what I can tell you is that when Buddhism, and this is really for anyone who doesn't know the history of Buddhism, but in brief, when the Buddha was alive, in India, and somewhere between time of his life and 100 years later, it goes south, Thailand, Laos, Vietnam, Cambodia, and you have the development of what's called Theravada Buddhism, right? And this is, or Hinayana. Hinayana means of the elders. I'll get back to that in a minute. About five, and this is what the Pali Canon is based in. So this is Theravada Buddhism. So there's one major school of Buddhism, Theravada Buddhism. Within that, there were a few little offshoots of that. But again, I've never studied Buddhism scholastically. I know enough to make it sound like I know what I'm talking about. But there was, what's the other one? Jonathan, you might know, Vastyavada. There's another school that kind of shot off of but there's another few little offshoots there. But Theravada Buddhism, about 500-600 years after the Buddha died, it goes up north, China, Japan, Korea. You have the development of Mahayana Buddhism, right? And then 1,000 years after the Buddha died, it goes into Tibet, and you have Vajrayana Buddhism. So in each one of those words, Hinayana, Mahayana, Vajrayana, the word yana, Y-A-N-A, means vehicle. So Hina was lesser, Maha is greater, Vajra is diamond. So you had a lesser vehicle and a greater vehicle. Buddhists came together and realized they shouldn't call one school of Buddhism greater and the other one lesser. So that's where the name Theravada comes from, which means of the elders. And that's based on the Pali Canon. Mahayana Buddhism has probably, you have the Zen practice, you have offshoots into Pure Land Buddhism, you have Yogacara Buddhism, you have, and even within Zen, you have Rinzai and Soto. There also were a number of different Zen sects, but the two that survived primarily were Rinzai, Soto. There's another one I'm trying to think of. I'll come back to it. And then in Tibetan Buddhism, you have 4 major schools. So even in my very surface level, Tibetan Buddhism, you got 4 major schools. Zen Buddhism, you have 2 that have survived. You have the Pure Land Buddhism. You have Shingon Buddhism. You have, that was the other one I was thinking of. And then you get into Theravada. So there's a decent amount. Yeah.
Are they all based in the Eightfold Path and for
Yeah, so that's, for me, one of the most beautiful teachings I got years ago was that every school of Buddhism comes from the Four Noble Truths. All of it, right? There's no teachings along the way that I've ever encountered that abandon that. I mean, sure, there's the Heart Sutra, Mahayana school, that Heart Sutra says, for those who don't know, the Four Noble Truths are, first one is life is suffering. It doesn't mean all of life sucks. It just means you're going to struggle a lot. Most people, if you're here, have figured that out by now. The second noble truth is the cause of suffering, greed, anger, ignorance. The third noble truth is the end of suffering, liberation, nirvana. And the fourth is the path. And that's what you're asking about, the Eightfold Path. And this is the correct views, thought, speech, action, livelihood, effort, mindfulness, concentration. And I always ramble those off quickly because it's all on Google and it's free and it's pretty easy to read in the first couple Google searches, right? But the question of, do they all come from that? To my understanding, yes. You have the first thing the Buddha taught, the first turn of the Dharma wheel, which is the Four Noble Truths. The fourth one being the Eightfold Path. Now you get to the Heart Sutra, and the Heart Sutra says there is no suffering, there is no cause of suffering, there's no cessation of suffering, and there is no path. But that's not necessarily negating the teachings of the Four Noble Truths. It's actually challenging your ability to live them and embody them versus philosophically understand them. And there aren't Buddhists, I know this isn't the nature of your question, I don't think, but, there's not like Buddhist countries going to war over like my Buddhism is better than your Buddhism, but they are practiced so differently. Tibetan Buddhism is so different. Zen is very austere, very, I'm going to sit silent, I'm going to stare at a wall, I'm not going to say a word, I'm not going to smile, And Tibetan Buddhism is like full of colors and loud. And somebody years ago said, if you're really into Tibetan Buddhism, you should go practice Zen. If you're really into Zen Buddhism, you should go practice Tibetan. Because what we're into speaks to our likes and our interests, which is important. But when it comes to Buddhist practice, it's like, okay, well, those are our cravings. Those are our desires. Can we cut through that? So, yeah, enough schools out there. And they pretty much all start with the Four Noble Truths and Eightfold Path. And then, just to add on to that for anyone who's newer to practice, is that and I said this last week, but as Buddhism spread, it really meshed with local cultures. So when it went to China, for example, you had Taoism, Shintoism, Confucianism, and then here comes Buddhism. So it meshes with that culture as well. So here we have Buddhism over the last 100+ years that's come into Western culture. And it meshes with Western religions so nicely. Yeah. So, yeah. Other questions? Yeah, I see a hand. No body, but a hand.
I was wondering if you could say a couple of words about aversion.
Aversion. Any other questions? Is that enough? So here's the thing with aversion, right? The Buddhist teachings, where this comes from, is that the Buddha taught very clearly that we have pleasant with our emotions, say, for example, our thoughts, pleasant, unpleasant, and neutral. And when we find something that is pleasant, we crave it, we desire it, and we constantly chase it. And then we get it, if we get it. Maybe we appreciate it for a minute or a year. And then we get tired of it and we want another one. Person, place, or thing. Or iPhone. Just about every iPhone you've all had worked perfectly fine until the new number came out. And then magically that ad just sucked you right in. You know, but if you buy it now, you get to save $300 when you already spent $600 on an iPhone that works just fine. So we crave and we desire things that we like. That's the easy part. But that's not your question. Your question is, what about the aversion? What do we do when we have aversion to things, people, or places? Procrastinate. What else? It's actually one word I was looking for. What?
Like shy away.
Shy away. I was just thinking run.
Okay.
You know?
Yeah.
Years ago, I was walking with a friend of mine, and this person was had a pretty deep understanding of Buddhism. And I remember, and this just plays to the nature of my, or conditioned personality and behavior, especially younger. As we were walking, where we were is irrelevant, but there was conflict. This is probably about 12, 13 years ago. There was conflict, actually maybe about this distance from me, you know, where I am to the back of the hall there. And we both saw conflict, sirens, loud noise, trouble, right? I started walking faster towards it. I turned to look at him. He was 15 steps that way. So aversion isn't just about going towards or away from something. It's really about what is our level of wisdom in engaging in a situation. Because if we have, I'm not saying this meaning I know what ultimate wisdom is, but if we have ultimate wisdom in a situation and we see the emptiness of every situation, meaning we're not attached to it, it doesn't impact us one way or the other, we're just observing it, aversion ceases to exist because then we're present with it. But what we all do is, when we're cold, what do we try to do? Get warm. When we're warm, try to get cold. When we're hungry, we want to eat more. When we're full, we wish we ate less. You know, it doesn't apply so much anymore because, like, not as many just listen to radios where you had to actually do commercials, or TVs where you had to do commercials. But now we can't even sit long enough through a commercial. We have an aversion to it. And billions of dollars of marketing were spent knowing that. So you pay an extra whatever to have no commercial because they all know you have an aversion to it. So if you can pay an extra $3.99 a month to not sit through that YouTube commercial, they make billions of dollars. Simple aversions. Are you aware of your simple aversions? I'm not even talking about deep things yet. Like, not to answer this, but ask yourself, like, what are the simple things throughout your day that you have an aversion to? You know? Maybe it's a certain color shirt that you wear because you don't think it looks good, you know, with your eyes, right? Maybe it's a pair of shoes that you don't think matches. I mean, we're in a society where, like, we try to match, like, what our shoes do with our belt. I mean, let's just think about that for a minute. right? My guess is your aversion was not referencing clothes,
Right.
right? But we're concerned, literally, about our shoes going with or matching our belt. I grew up my entire life this way. And then the seasons change, and then it's fall. And you can't wear certain colors, right? I mean, those of you who are laughing, you know what I'm talking about. And you're all facing this way, but I see enough smiles, right? Then the seasons change, and then the colors change that we have to wear. And we get stuck in this crap. And we think this stuff matters. And then we want to deal with like real life stuff, like, broken hearts and family members that pass away and, losing jobs and heavy attachments and, food and shelter, like real things that matter. But we're still stuck on making sure we got our fall colors, So I would suggest exploring for each of you, like, what are your aversions? Like, could you actually wear something that doesn't match? It's my sock example. I've given it 1,000 times, Does that help?
Thanks.
Do you have an aversion to that answer?
No,
You've been here long enough, Yeah. Yeah.
Why do I feel like Buddha would whisper in my ear and it with aversion and say, sit with it?
Say that again. Why do you feel that the Buddha would whisper in your...
Whisper in my ear when I have an aversion,
Oh.
like, sit with it.
Yeah, I mean, I think that whether the Buddha would whisper that in your ear or not, I think that's a great practice. Because that's, in essence, what we want to train ourselves. Buddhism, like, it's a training. It's a mind training. And Western culture doesn't come into Buddhism as a training. It comes into it as an escape. And I get it. I mean, great. Let's all escape to the peaceful thing that doesn't harm people. Beautiful. We have enough escapes that are unhealthy. So if we use Buddhism initially as an escape, beautiful. But again, that's what I was talking about earlier, is where, okay, we've escaped to it long enough. We've been sitting through this long enough. Now I need to stop escaping. Now I need to learn to sit with it. So when we have an aversion, and of course the asterisks, if you're in a safety issue, domestic violence, things like that. Like, I'm not saying sit there while you're being abused. Please move. But I'm talking about emotional stuff that comes up, and when we can sit with certain things, sit with it. Absolutely, 100%. Yeah. In most cases, the problem isn't the person, place, or thing. Actually, in all cases, but I'm giving us some leeway here. The problem is what? Our view, our perception, ourselves. Yeah. Other thoughts, questions? I'm still laughing at the fact that I went to fall colors. I don't even know how I got there. What else? Thoughts, questions?
I have a question.
Yeah.
So, I've been checking out the 4 Noble Truths and stuff, and about how, our suffering is connected to our desire to have more of certain things, and so I get that on a lot of levels, but I know when it's causing harm or something to us, then it's, we're disassociated or whatever, but does that mean that we shouldn't have an attachment to anything?
Sure. Great question. And to clarify a couple things. So desire and non-attachment are 2 separate teachings. Okay. Let me say a few things and hopefully address both, and then hopefully address what you're asking. Because it is important to understand that, as the Buddha taught, there are healthy cravings. There are healthy desires. And they're rooted in your intention. Right? As he taught, if you didn't crave to suffer less, you wouldn't be sitting here right now. You have a desire, as we all do, to suffer less. Beautiful. That desire is important. And the intention is beautiful. Because, well, let me ask you this before I assume. Do you want to suffer less? Is that, yeah? Okay. Why? Why do you want to suffer less?
Have more peace.
Have more peace. And what else?
Just be more comfortable.
More comfortable. And one more thing I'm going for is, what about people around you? If you're at peace and you feel more comfortable and you suffer less, how does that impact those around you?
Everybody.
Say again?
Everybody. Because everybody. It's how you put that vibe out.
Right.
Is how you people perceive it.
But it affects them in what way?
They probably feel a little more comfortable.
A little more comfortable. I just wanted you to actually say this so you could hear yourself saying it. So your intentions are to suffer less because it'll help you be at peace, feel more comfortable, and also have a positive impact on others. Beautiful intention. The Buddha wasn't saying abandon that craving and that desire, right? I don't need you to say these out loud, nor anybody for that matter, but do you have any unhealthy cravings and desires?
Me?
Yeah. I don't need to know what they are. I don't want to know what they are.
I don't want to get on to it's fine. No, I mean, I'm a musician, so I have 4 drum kits. So.
4 drum kits. Okay. So perfect example, right? Musician, beautiful. Drums, beautiful. There's nothing wrong with 4 drum kits. So the thing to be careful of here, especially if you're new to Buddhism, is it's not like there's some teaching of the Buddha that says you're going to Buddhist hell if you have 4 drum kits. Okay? But here's the thing. Just as an idea, I'm working with you here for a minute, right? Do you think I'll even be nice and say 2. Do you think there's 2 people out there in San Diego that, are they nice drum kits? You got 4 of them, I'm guessing. Okay.
They're all nice in some way.
Okay. So I'm guessing there's 2 people out there. Maybe some kid, who knows? Parents want to get a drum set for their kids, they can't afford it. Or an adult who wants to play the drums, can't afford it. Right? Could you be okay if you just had 2 drum kits? And how beautiful would it feel to know that you gave 2 drum sets or kits, I don't know what you call them, to somebody else? And they want to play the drums. If you're a drummer and you're a musician, I'm sure there's nothing you'd love to see more than other people find that same passion. Now imagine some 15-year-old kid who has such a passion for the drums, but can't afford them. And you could change their life by giving them one of those drum sets. So you're not greedy or terrible or a bad Buddhist because you have 4 drum sets. But imagine if you gave away 2 and kept 2. You see where this is going? So it's for each person, it's healthy to explore what are your cravings, what are your desires, and what's the intention behind it. And if the intention is for self, for greed, for ego, for me, then there's your answer of, if it's healthy or not. If your intention is to, make sure others are at peace and healthy and happy as well, including ourselves, then, there's your answer. So, yeah. Anything else before we wrap up here? All right, so we'll join palms. We'll close the transfer of merit. May any merit gained from this practice be transferred to all beings in all directions. May all be at peace and free from suffering. May we all be at peace and free from suffering. All right, a few quick announcements before you all head out. First off, thanks for being here. My name is Jeff. I'm a Dharma bum. We opened up this temple about 17 years ago to introduce Buddhist practice to local folks. Those of us who lead, we're not monks, we're not nuns, we're not gurus, we're not masters, we're not teachers, we're not looking for students. We're just practitioners. We do our best to take our understanding of Buddhist teachings and put it into terms that hopefully make sense to those who show up. So thanks for showing up. Just about every night we have different practices going on, different people leading from a different school of Buddhism. First Saturday of the month, we have a half day of silence. So it's 4 hours of silence. If you've never done 4 hours of silence, it's really beautiful. To my knowledge, everybody who's done it has survived. If it seems scary, it's 20 to 25 minute meditation sessions that's broken up. So you have a break, 5-minute break, and then that repeats, and there's a walking session, a cleaning session. So it's not like you're just stuck here for 4 hours straight. So it's a beautiful practice. It also then makes 20 minutes of sitting a little bit gentler. So if you've never done 4 hours, that's great. Recovery Sangha group downstairs. We got about 4 or 5 meetings of that going on each week. A new one on Friday nights at 7. So anyone battling addiction, drugs, alcohol, or any addiction for that matter. We've had for about 12, 13 years, a beautiful Recovery Sangha here. Family Sangha, a lot going on. And one of the new things we started this year is a Sangha social crew. And so one of the things that we've had for years is people show up, they do stuff, and then they go. They show up, they do stuff, and then they go. But we've never had much where people kind of hang out socially. So, we're not throwing like keg parties or anything like that. But we're going to, the first one is coming up on Sunday. This stuff's on the website, but they're going to meet at 1:30. If you want to carpool, you can meet here at 12:45. But it'll be to Ridgecrest Ecological Reserve out east of El Cajon, I believe. But it's all on the website. So if you want to just go hang out and go on a little walk, little hike, that'll be this Sunday. And they're going to plan something once a month. So that's out there. Food distribution has started again every Thursday, 5 o'clock. We prepare sandwiches and feed people on the streets who sleep on the streets every night. So if you want to just do something good and hang out with a bunch of people, that's every Thursday at 5. Just show up. If you want to drop off peanut butter, jelly, bread anytime, you're welcome to, or just show up on Thursday at 5. Happy to have you. And the last thing, the most special announcement for tonight, Carly, who's been hosting for a while on Tuesdays, is going to be unavailable for probably a couple months. So there has been an opening in the Dharma Bum host schedule. So what that means is, the person who gets to wear that real fancy badge at the door that says Dharma Bum host, I know you want it just because of that. And then asks you when you come in if you have a cough or cold or anything like that, right? So if you can wear a badge and ask people if you have a cough or cold and just stay there from open up at 6:30 and stay there till about 7:10, we're looking to add 1 to 2 more people. And you would host probably twice a month. We have 2 people each night. So you do twice a month. So if you're interested, if you are someone who's kind of a regular on a Tuesday night, which is where we need somebody right now, and you want to, get a cool badge, let me know. So thanks all for being here. Good luck.
Thanks, Jeff.
Thank you.